All right, let's dive right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to unpack the journey of a guy who literally needs no introduction in the sporting world, Virat Kohli. It's so easy when we look at absolute legends to just fall into the trap of thinking, oh, they're just God-gifted. We assume they have this magical talent that the rest of us just don't have. But today, we're going to completely shatter that illusion. We're going to decode the discipline, the sweat, and the sheer, unmatched dedication that actually built this legend from the ground up. Because, let's be real, we live in a world that only really sees the glamour, right? The fame, the massive records, the endless brand endorsements. We just see the final, polished product. But what people completely miss is the invisible, grueling reality behind it all, the sweat and the discipline. The truth is, there is absolutely no substitute for hard work. Today, we're going to learn from that exact unseen process and figure out how we can apply that champion mindset to become better in our own lives. So let's start at the beginning. Chapter 1, Early Passion and Junior Days. Now, this wasn't some overnight success story. This was a fire that got ignited at an incredibly young age. Back in 1997, Virat was just a 9-year-old kid who had been swinging a bat since he was 3. His local performances were so impressive that his dad enrolled him in the West Delhi Cricket Academy under coach Rajkumar Sharma. He was gifted for sure, and he picked up the basics super fast. But then, 2001 brought a massive roadblock. He actually got rejected from the Delhi under-14 team. But get this, he didn't quit. He bounced right back with stellar performances at the district level, which led to his under-15 selection in 2002. There, he eventually became the leading run scorer and the captain. By 2006, his technique was catching the eyes of national coaches, landing him in the under-19 squad. And finally, after captaining India to a massive under-19 World Cup victory, he made his ODI debut for India in 2008 against Sri Lanka. That 2001 rejection, it didn't stop him. It literally fueled him. Which brings us to Chapter 2, a tragic test of discipline. We need to shift gears for a second, moving from his professional timeline to a deeply personal, absolutely heartbreaking crucible. On December 18, 2006, Virat was just 18 years old, playing in India's premier domestic tournament, the Ranji Trophy. On that very day, his father, Prem Kohli, the man who had supported his cricket dream literally from day one, tragically passed away. His dad had always dreamed of seeing him play for the Indian national team. Faced with this unimaginably heavy heart, what did Virat do? He put a stone on his heart and walked right out onto the pitch. He batted that very day, scoring a crucial 90 runs for Delhi, and it was only after he was dismissed that he finally returned home to perform his father's final rites. Reflecting on that day, his mother, Suraj Kohli, noted a very quiet but pivotal shift in him. She said, "After this incident, Virat became very mature." Just think about that. The sheer discipline required to compartmentalize such profound grief and step onto the field for your team, it's just staggering. It forged an unbreakable resilience in him. This wasn't just a game of cricket anymore. It became a deeply ingrained mission to honor his father's dream. So it really makes you wonder, right? Is raw talent alone enough to survive your absolute lowest moments? The answer is a pretty resounding no. Early maturity, natural talent, a beautiful cover drive, those things alone wouldn't be enough to sustain a legendary international career. Talent might get you noticed, sure, but it is an ironclad discipline and mental toughness that actually gets you through your darkest days. Let's move on to Chapter 3, the ultimate fitness transformation. So how exactly do you take that kind of mental toughness and translate it into sheer physical dominance? Well, the answer is 11. I really want that number to sink in for a second. This isn't just some random stat. 11 represents the exact number of kilograms he dropped in a mere 8 months during a massive fitness overhaul that kicked off in 2012. He realized that to be the absolute best in the world, his body literally had to be a machine. And achieving that kind of transformation requires a pretty grueling daily reality. We're talking a hyper-strict diet. On some days, he was eating absolutely nothing but boiled food just to stick to his regimen. Like I said, he dropped those 11 kilos in 8 months. But what truly separates the good from the great here is the consistency. His childhood coach Rajkumar Sharma observed that Virat never missed a single training session. Never. In fact, his passion was so relentless, almost obsessive really, that his coaches routinely had to forcefully send him home in the evenings because he simply refused to stop practicing. Now that is the absolute gold standard of discipline. And all of that hard work leads us to Chapter 4, conquering the international stage. This newly forged physical and mental discipline became his absolute armor. But believe me, the international stage was a total roller coaster. In 2011, life tested him yet again. He had a pretty poor test debut against the West Indies and was actually dropped for the subsequent England series. But true to form, he bounced back in 2012 with an explosive, legendary 133 not out against Sri Lanka and Australia. Then we hit 2014, a notoriously disastrous tour of England where his technique was severely exposed. It was an incredibly tough phase for him. But armed with that relentless work ethic we've been talking about, he went straight back to the drawing board. He patched his weaknesses, tightened his technique, and fast forward to 2016, he hits an absolute peak, scoring a mind-boggling 973 runs and 4 centuries in a single IPL season.
Which honestly brings us to a really powerful truth. Great people know exactly how to turn a disaster into an opportunity. Or, as the saying goes in Hindi, "Mahan log aapda ko avsar banana jante hain." When Virat failed in England back in 2014, he didn't sit around making excuses. Instead, he used that exact disaster as a blueprint to improve. He completely reinvented his technique, and that reinvention paved the way for his absolute dominance across all formats, both as a captain and a premier batter.
Let's wrap things up with Chapter 5, The Secret Champion Mindset. So what is the actual engine driving a legend like this? Well, he summarizes it perfectly in his own words. Believe in yourself and everything is possible. Now, I know that sounds simple, right? Maybe even a little cliche. But when you look at that quote through the lens of a kid who was rejected at under 14, a teenager playing through the agonizing grief of losing his dad, a player dropped from the test squad, and a batsman humiliated in England, well, suddenly that extreme self-belief is not just some motivational poster quote. It is a vital survival tool. It's the absolute foundation of literally all his records and success.
And this actually reveals his ultimate secret. If you focus solely on the process, the daily grind, the boiled food, the never missing a session, competing only with who you were yesterday, and genuinely enjoying the act of getting better, then the fame, the money, and the titles, they simply become byproducts. If you spend your life chasing the byproducts, you're going to stumble. But if you dedicate yourself entirely to the process, the rest is automatically going to follow. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this one thought. Are you focusing on the daily process, or are you just sitting around waiting for the byproduct? Remember, Virat Kohli wasn't just born a legend. He built himself into one through unwavering discipline, an extreme focus on his fitness journey, and a crazy ability to turn every single failure into a stepping stone. Take a second to reflect on your own daily grind. Embrace the sweat, fall in love with the process, and just see where your own discipline can take you. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep pushing your own boundaries.